Creative Assembly released an update for Rome 2 nearly 2 weeks back. For a game that's been out for 5 years, a lot of people have been very thankful CA has done this. This is understandable. What I don't understand is why people are now all too eager to praise CA with the reverence of some consumer champion, despite this very obviously not being an altruistic act stemming from CA being concerned with the evergreen quality of their games. Go to a Total War subreddit, forums, YouTube videos, etc., and hundreds of people are all too eager to board the Creative Assembly praise train, acting as if this patch is redemption for the myriad of grievances Creative Assembly has done, despite CA doing something shady just a month prior to this update, adding to their long list of outright consumer hostile activities. It seems people need a refresher of the past 5 or so years. Rome 2 released in what many would consider a beta state. The game was so horribly unoptimized that many couldn't even run it. If you could run it, then the campaign map was flowing with poorly designed and incomplete features, including the AI, which was almost a non-element with how laughably poor it was at resisting the player's conquests. If you miraculously found yourself against a large, well-composed army that consisted of something other than skirmishers, then you likely had all excitement ruined as the AI nonsensically charged into your troops with a death wish. If against all odds the AI functioned with the tiniest bit of intelligence in your battle, then you'd be let down with the broken and unbalanced battle mechanics with features from previous Total War games outright missing. Rome 2 at launch was Congealed Chagrin. A game that had been hyped as the sequel to CA's first legendary title was an unplayable dumpster fire. To add insult to injury, Creative Assembly had the audacity to strip out various factions from the campaign and sell them as Day 1 DLC. If you want a prime example of how to kill all hype for your entire franchise, look no further than Rome 2. It has permanently stained CA's reputation after they slowly built trust back up with their fan base after another disastrous launch that was Empire 4 years prior. On a side note, if you need an example of how absolutely worthless mainstream review outlets are, check out Rome 2's review scores, keeping in mind it was nigh unplayable at launch. Do you have a number in your head? Ready? 7 and 8s across the board. I digress. Unlike Empire, Creative Assembly put a considerable amount of time and effort into fixing Rome 2. After almost an entire year of bugs fixes, balance changes, added features, and engine tweaks, Rome 2 would gain the Emperor Edition moniker at the end of the title. 1 year later, Rome 2 was in something that resembled a finished product. Rather than abandoning Rome 2 and releasing a more polished sequel with similar gameplay, like Creative Assembly did with Empire, they actually fixed their game. Some will argue that this was admirable, but I'd counter that the Emperor Edition is how Rome 2 should have released at the bare minimum. Creative Assembly had effectively shattered all consumer trust of the player base with Rome 2's launch. If they had kept Rome 2 in the state it was in, CA's reputation would have been cemented as a terrible company, down there with the likes of EA, Warner Brothers, Ubisoft, and the like. Fixing a game to resemble a finished product should be expected, not commended. And that's what CA did. They should still be held accountable for the mockery Rome 2 launched as, but some punches should be pulled because at least they tried to rectify their wrongdoings. Now that CA has come around again with a patch which generally does improve the game, people seem to be forgetting CA's legacy includes more than just Rome 2. There's been 4 games in between Rome 2's disastrous launch and the July 12, 2018 Ancestral Update patch, with plenty of folly in that time. So while the Ancestral patch may finally make up for Rome 2's disastrous launch, it definitely doesn't make up for the wrongs they've done to other communities of their other games. Attila is probably the most obvious point of contention. I've heard good things about Attila Total War. I've heard the game's campaign captures a feeling of survival, where your faction are remnants in a world falling apart. That's it. I've heard about Attila. I, along with many others, cannot run Attila, despite owning a mid-range PC. For a game that runs nearly identical to Rome 2 on the technical side, I'm baffled to how Attila runs significantly worse. Rome 2 had some terrible performance issues when it first released, so most consumers probably expected Creative Assembly to come around with some major patch which significantly improved the performance. That didn't happen, and Attila still runs terrible to this day. It's so awful that Warhammer, the follow-up to Attila, can run as much as twice as well. Why Creative Assembly never bothered to fix Attila's performance, we may never know. We do know that Attila didn't sell even remotely as well as Rome 2, but it's hard to determine why. I think it's safe to say that the concept of basing a game in classical antiquity during the height of the Roman Republic is likely to attract more customers than the Age of Attila the Hun, but that would merely be one factor. It's highly likely that many consumers were turned away by Attila's atrocious Steam reviews, citing bugs and performance problems. Creative Assembly's habit of overcharging for copious amounts of menial DLC probably didn't help. After the relative success of Warhammer, CA returned to a historical setting with Thrones of Britannia and oh my, There are complaints of a lack of content to the point where people are wondering why this isn't an expansion for Rome or Attila. The game has outright removed staples of the Total War series, streamlining to a degree where dumbing down would be a more appropriate term. The atrocious reception Thrones is receiving is not out to bugs, glitches, or any technical limitations this time. People are disliking the game solely on the merits of its gameplay. If there's a word that fits both Attila and Thrones of Britannia, it's rushed. Both these games evidently need more time for polish and QA, yet were released to the general public to mixed reception. I really don't know how much longer Crave Assembly can keep doing this before they lose all merit and are no longer able to break even. Disclaimer: if you've been following an uproar over a certain feature people discussed in CA's games recently, you know everything about to discuss for the next minute or so. Red Shell is a program that Crave Assembly elected to use in their games. The software transmits information about the user to servers where it can be viewed. We know this information can include your hardware, data pertaining to the game, and software on the user's computer such as the web browser. We don't know how long or truly why CA has done this, but the details aren't that imperative when compared to CA's abysmal defense. Crave Assembly's Grace claimed Red Shell is a program used to measure the effectiveness of their marketing, and that it is indeed not spyware. She continued we could opt out of the program tracking our web activities at any time by going to the Red Shell website we didn't know about because we didn't know Red Shell was even in the games. After reading CA's fallacious non-apology, there are two major problems. Number one, we still do not know what information Crave Assembly extracted. Using cookies to generate a unique token of the user, and comparing that with data taken from our marketing campaigns and game activations is not specific. What information does Crave Assembly have? It's obvious why a company would want data to test the efficacy of their marketing. I can understand this. I myself am an analytical person. However, taking this information without the user's consent or even knowledge is duplicitous. How can us consumers be sure Crave Assembly is not planning something mischievous with our information, which, once again, we do not know what Crave Assembly collected? Do they have my search history? Do they know what websites I frequently visited? Do they record the activities on what I did on those websites? We don't know. There's also the question of how secure this data is. Even if CA only has the most righteous of intentions, which people who do shady practices such as this usually don't, that doesn't mean our data is safe. If a hacker cracked into Red Shell's databases and leaked the data, then everyone who's played a Total War game since the inclusion of Red Shell is screwed. Number 2. Simply put, Red Shell is spyware. The Webster Dictionary's definition of spyware is software that is installed in a computer without the user's knowledge and transmits information about the user's computer activities over the internet. CA's application of Red Shell fits this definition perfectly. The intention is meaningless. If Crave Assembly had included a terms and service document stating the game had Red Shell with the option to opt out, then this whole debacle could have been avoided. However, they didn't. Red Shell was intentionally kept under the radar. Red Shell is spyware. To add even more fuel for the fire, as I started writing this, I learned firsthand that Crave Assembly had stopped server support for Shogun 2, the game many of the community consider to be the best Total War. Curious. I have my own, probably incorrect, speculation as to why this was done, but no, Shogun 2's multiplayer community wasn't dead. Rome 1, Medieval 2, Napoleon, and Shogun 2 all have a living multiplayer scene. While not large, they do exist. You can typically be certain there will at least be a couple in open lobbies when you log in to play these games at normal gaming hours. Now we come back to Rome 2's Ancestral patch. This patch vexes me. I do genuinely appreciate free content, especially 5 years after launch, but there are some massive caveats associated with this patch. This is not some altruistic act on Crave Assembly's part, as much as they'd love to spin it that way. CA is well aware Rome 2 is their most successful Total War game right now. It has the largest active player base of the historical Total Wars and outsells all other Total War games every Steam sale. As such, Crave Assembly is continuing to release DLC for Rome 2. This patch is to draw attention to Rome 2 in a favorable light and, maybe draw attention to Rome 2's DLC as well, such as the DLC Crave Assembly announced a week after the Ancestral patch. This is not an update that stems from the kindness of CA's heart. This is an attempt to make more money, which is fine. Nothing about this is sinister. Companies need to make more money. However, the community framing Crave Assembly as Sede Project Sun is misleading and uninformed. There's a couple downsides to this patch. First, now some mods don't work anymore. Mods that have functioned for 4 or so years are now busted. Woo. I'd also like to actually evaluate the contents of the patch itself because it really displays how unfinished the Total War games have become after Shogun 2. The big change, the main feature of the update, adding a family tree, has been a feature of Total War games since 2002. It was in Rome 2's predecessor, Shogun 2, It was a feature that was in Rome 2's direct prequel, Rome 1. This is not a new, innovative idea. This is taking an important feature from previous games Crave Assembly neglected or didn't have time to add into Rome 2, and injecting it into the game 5 years late. The contents of this patch should have been present in base Rome 2 on launch. We should not be praising Crave Assembly to the absurd amount the community has done so far, because they added an expected feature into Rome 2 5 years late. With all the DLC Crave Assembly keeps making for Rome 2, all the updates, the discussions, the good press they're trying to obtain surrounding it, and shutting down service support for Rome 2's prequels, I get the feeling Crave Assembly is trying to make Rome 2 their flagship game. Some magnum opus that will stand as the definitive Total War experience. But the funny thing is, for all the bug fixes, worthwhile the lazy DLC, the overhauls Crave Assembly has made over the years, Shogun 2 is still a directly superior game to Rome 2. The amount of polish is far and away greater, the campaign is not a cakewalk, and somehow it looks better than Rome 2. The best part about this is Shogun 2 functioned properly on day 1. I don't know what to make of Crave Assembly that, despite their efforts, they still can't make a game better than Shogun 2. Rome 1 still does certain aspects better than Rome 2. Please, don't buy Crave Assembly's superficial attempts to rectify their very large quantity of misdeeds. Don't buy their attempt to present Rome 2 as the swan song of the series. Don't forget all their heinous anti-consumer actions over the decade. Just because a company doesn't stoop to the same low as their peers, doesn't mean they shouldn't be held accountable for their own blunders. Stay wary and cautious of Crave Assembly. They have a lot to make up for if they ever want to earn consumer trust again.